Hey everybody, Dave Rollins here. I wanted to share with you this interview that I shot last year with Nick Brandreth from the Eastman Kodak Museum. So without further ado, let's dive right on in.
How big is your darkroom?
Well, it's essentially like my whole basement. So as you can see, it's like I have like the sink behind me, so we kind of go down a little bit. So I got the stainless steel sink with, different beakers and whatnot. And then if I rotate you over here, this is kind of like my lab table with all my hot plate and different stuff. And you're actually on the enlarger table right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it still functions as a basement. So you can see like there's like my washer and dryer right over there.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
it's still part of my basement. Like my wife's closet is in front of me where she has a lot of her clothes. So that doubles as the sound booth if I have to record audio for something. So it's nice and muffled in there. And then like right on the other side of the table is where all the hologram stuff is. So I do most of the hologram stuff on the floor because the basement, we have basements out here on the East Coast. So it's just like, I'm underground on a cement floor, and then all these, I have heavy pieces of steel, 60-pound slabs of steel on inner tubes, to dampen any vibration and stuff like that. So for doing any hologram stuff. And then I have my dark room, there's just the traditional stuff. Like I said, you're on the enlarger right now. So if I want to do some enlargements, I can just, hop in the sink with a regular developer, stop bath fixer, whatever you need to do, we can do it down here in the basement of Magic and
why
Wonders.
the steel plates, though?
So when you're doing holography, the only thing that holography and photography have in common, really, it's the light sensitive material. You're using some kind of light sensitive plate or light sensitive film, and other than that, they're kind of like apples and bananas. And you need the heavy tables and isolated stuff, because any vibration between your subject or your plate can kind of ruin what's happening. So if you're sitting there and you're kind of yelling at it, you don't think anything's happening, but there's little kind of teeny tiny vibrations happening, and that can ruin how the hologram's made. Because at least the way I'm making them, it's about recording where the laser light is essentially crossing over itself within the plate, kind of.
I'm curious what the exposure times then are for that, minutes?
No, mine are down. Again, if it's closer to the laser, the front of the source, the exposure times are way shorter. But then, the further you get away from it, they'll get a little bit longer. And a lot of it's about your setup. The chemical part's easy for me. I can make the plates. That's no problem. It's about making sure everything's lined up, everything's precise, because if you're off just a little bit, you could be losing 20% of your laser's power or something like that. So I'm just shooting my laser straight at it and making what's called essentially a reflection hologram. And it's about 70 inches from the little filter that I use to the thing, and the exposure times are about 45 seconds, give or take. So it's not that bad. It's actually pretty quick, all things considered. And I was trying some other ones where I was bouncing it off a mirror to try to keep it all, because I have a big optical table. So an optical table is a big slab, but it's got holes punched in it so you can screw in optical equipment to do different things. That holds the laser, but to get it farther away, it needs to be 70 inches. I don't have 70 inches worth of optical table, so that's why I got the big 60-pound slab of steel, because it's essentially the same thing. But I'm using little magnet bases from Harbor Freight to kind of hold whatever I need in place on the steel. So that's kind of further out in the room. And, I was trying to play around with the mirror, keeping everything on just the optical table. Fun, you can bounce it around and stuff like that, but it chewed up the exposure. So I was into a minute and a half, and it was still kind of underexposed. So I said, frig this, going back to the other way. So it's constant experimentation. I'm very much in my infancy. I wouldn't call myself an expert at this, yet. I'm further along than your average person who just jumps into holography by themselves. You know what I mean? The fact that I can make my plates, and do them, I'm like, ooh, look at this, this is fun, but
that's lasers are needed for that, right?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate. I'm always blessed that I have friends that do cool stuff, and I know people. And that's part of the thing about just kind of just being out there and being involved in whatever you're doing. You know, the more you interact with people, the more you find the stuff that you like. And I have a friend who's a professor at RIT, and he's just like, he saw I was making this specific type of emulsion, and he's like, hey, here's a laser, here's an optical table, you know, because all this stuff is very expensive, you know, so he just kind of tossed it to me. But the cool thing is like nowadays, like with a lot of the maker stuff, like, I don't know, you can get into it a little bit cheaper than you would have been able to, like, to try to make a hologram in 1980 would be a little bit harder than it is nowadays, you know, with the things that you can get, you know, laser technology is better.
What's the era of the first ones?
Again, like with holography doesn't like really kind of pop up. I think there's like early experiments. Again, I'm not really an expert. I'm still reading and learning a lot of this. Like my expertise is in photography, not holography. But it's just like everything kind of starts to go like this and, you know, blend together. It's just blurs after a while. I think, again, I think they start popping up, I want to say the 50s, the 40s. And I think it was kind of an American guy. I think something had to do with like University of Michigan and like them figuring something out. But then the type of hologram that I'm making, and I'm not even going to try to say it because I'll butcher it. It begins with a D. It's a Russian scientist, and I believe in like maybe like the 60s or the 70s, he kind of unlocked that you can make this reflection type hologram where you didn't have to do some of the complicated other things that you need. So that's the type that I'm making, which is kind of fun. So yeah, it is like it all does. It's more of a modern thing than, you know, some of the other stuff that I'm into doing.
Yeah, because like wet plate is like way back. I mean, when wet plate started, they didn't have any lasers.
No. I think the first experiments, because like I don't think they used a laser for the first experiment. They used like a heavy duty kind of like arc light because it put out a certain. It's about having a consistent single wavelength, you know, because white light is an amalgamation of all different types of light, many different wavelengths kind of coalescing together to give you a full color spectrum, where a laser is a concentrated light source of a single wave, right? So it's just like all you get is just like one wavelength that's just like super intense and super focused. That's what a laser beam is, versus like when you turn on your white light bulb, it just goes beep, and there's just like all sorts of stuff scattering all over the place. This is super focused. You know, it's like freaking, it's a razor blade, you know, compared to, you know, a tennis racket, if you will.
So I had some questions for you. Like, well, the first one was just to ask your background in photography.
I've always liked cameras ever since I was a little kid. You know, anytime my parents or my grandparents came around me with a camera, like it was always like, what is that thing? And it wasn't until I was probably in high school, 15, 16 years old, that I started getting interested in photography. My parents gave me my first camera. We didn't have a photography program at the high school I went to, but I just kind of took it upon myself to dive in and teach myself photography, because it's like, I want this, I'm going to go and do it. You know, that's how I've always sort of approached my life. So I started doing that. I went to RIT. Eventually, I studied photography there, graduated. I moved back home, and I grew up outside of New York City. So while I was in school, I was developing relationships. So like I ended up freelancing a lot for Mercedes-Benz because their corporate office was based in North Jersey, close to where I live. And I started shooting a lot for the Bergen Record, which was like North Jersey's newspaper. So doing a lot of that stuff. And then, you know, just trying to play that photography game in New York City, trying to assist and do anything like that I can. I ended up applying and going to the Eddie Adams workshop, which is like a really, it's a cool thing to go to if somebody's a student fresh out of school and they're interested in photography, documentary photography and storytelling and things like that. They accept 100 students from around the world, and you have to submit a portfolio every year. And then when you get in, everything's paid for as long as you can get there. And it's a cool experience. And from there, I started shooting for the Wall Street Journal. And I had other stuff that I was doing. I shot for Decline magazine because I was super into like action sports and that type of stuff. During a certain period of my life, that was like really what I was super hyped on, because I was passionate about the bike riding and the photography kind of fit together to tell those stories about my buddies and all the things and everybody that was around us. But eventually, like I felt I grew past that and I needed to move on to something else. But all the while still assisting and shooting, and I'm doing all right. I'm making a living as a photographer in New York, New Jersey, right outside of the city. And I ended up taking a workshop at the Eastman Museum. My coworker Mark was basically at the time like, hey, I want someone to come be my apprentice. He's the process historian at the museum, Mark Osterman, and he really took me under his wing, and I became his apprentice for a full year, unpaid. So I busted my butt and saved every penny that I had, and like any day that I wasn't doing something photography related, I worked for a landscaping construction crew or did some odd job just to hustle and make money. And I moved up there and I worked for free for a year and just soaked as much knowledge as I could. And, Mark and I jived so well, and we became really good friends, and we're still really good friends to this day. He was really just like, he was a mentor, but like in that like classical sort of like master apprentice, relationship. And by the end of them, before the year was over, the museum hired me full time. And that was almost like 9 years ago now. So in 2012, I've been there ever since. And Mark and I run the workshop program together. And since moving back to Rochester, I sort of shifted away from the more, working as a photographer in that sense. Now I've been able to focus more on my own fine art where, I sold prints. I've done some artist residencies. I've had some solo shows. I've been in some group shows and things like that. And it's nice to be able to focus on that because I have the job at the museum. But really my passion now is it's photography as a whole. I love the science of photography. I love the art of photography, and I love the history of photography. And, being able to sort of cross discipline like that, I think is what is a strength of mine. And, I was always, I wasn't, how do I say this? I wasn't the best student growing up, but I wasn't dumb by any means. I couldn't take tests well, things like that. So I was always in like the resource room with a study skills class. But, I was never a dummy, but I had to learn a certain way, and I learned that everybody learns a certain way. And I understand how I learned very well. And I'm able to, digest and process information, technical information, which photography is nice because it's universal. I could work with you. I worked with someone from Japan who spoke very little English. He understood more than he could speak. But we were able to work together, and I was able to teach him how to make a daguerreotype. And then next summer, he came back, and I taught him how to make gelatin dry plates. And another summer, he came back, and we worked on making collodion negatives. And, it's universal, so you don't need that language. But to be able to break stuff down and to teach it someone who can't speak your language, or even someone who can, that's my job, is to make it digestible because it can be really dense. But when some people like yourself, when you actually have a deep understanding, we can have a more not sophisticated conversation, but like deeper. We can jump into like, oh, I like this because of that or something, or even someone who wants to talk about something more conceptual or why it's there. So being able to have all of that, that's really kind of like my passion now, and I'm trying my best with the museum to kind of keep some of that stuff alive, because the way I look at it is, in 100 years, you're going to be able to go back to a museum somewhere and see how they made a carpet on a loom, in the 15th century or something like that. You can go to a village and see how they made butter, in the 1800s and stuff like that. But where are you going to be able to really go and see how they made film, how they coated it, what a slit coater was, what a curtain coater was? You can't see some of that stuff because a lot of it was a corporate thing. It was, they just didn't, you can't let that stuff out there to the world. But there's other parts of photography, which is like some of my favorite is like the beginnings of photography when you're into like, the early 19th century, when you go through the daguerreotype era, the wet plate era, the dry plate era, and then you get into film, like that initial sort of chunk is very fun to see how the processes change. And pre-1900, it's very open source, and photography, and I've talked about this 100 times in other places, but it's fun because it was about sharing, and we're back to that in a way because of the internet. That like we could share documents right now, flip flop, and just like back and forth, and we have all the knowledge is accessible, but to have a person that can break down each thing and make it digestible, because there's going to be people who are experts at daguerreotype who will be way better than making daguerreotypes than I will ever be. There's going to be somebody who's way better better at doing collodion than I will ever be. Dry plate, I don't know. I'm pretty dope with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I'll battle anybody for that. But no, there's people out there. I have friends who I talk to in Australia. Shout out to my buddy Lee. My buddy Jason in New Hampshire, who does Pictoria Graphica and is selling dry plates. Like, Jason's a brilliant guy. He's a scientist and an engineer, but he's also an artist. And so it's fun to see that people are out there and doing that. But to have somebody that, understands all of them, and I can dive in and make a daguerreotype with you right now if we really had to, a certain way, not with mercury and stuff like that. If I had to make a tintype right now, I could do it. I had to make an emulsion, had to make a certain type of, I could make a platinum print, boom, without thinking about it. I have it all dialed in. And there's other people who can do it, but, I feel like I get excited and I can get you hyped on it. And that's what would separate me from sort of somebody else. It's like getting you sort of jazzed, and like, let's go do some photography, So that's where I'm at right now. And it's cool because I have that job at the museum where I can get you hyped about photography and trying to do something. I love talking to people who are just out, like, yeah, I'm going to shoot a roll of film. I'm like, hell yeah, dude. Like, can't wait to see when it comes back. People who aren't photographers, but it's exciting to see people get pumped about something new. So to have that chance to be there at the museum and like make that my job is really special. And I feel really privileged to have that opportunity to do that. And I'm very thankful to the museum, and I'm thankful to, Mark for helping to initially give me that great opportunity to kind of be like the Johnny Appleseed, for photography hype, and getting people excited. And, that's sort of, that's my,
I think that's one of the
story to where I got here.
I think that's one of the best things you can do with your craft, is sharing it, inspiring others,
That's the best part about photography, is that like everybody can take the same basic stuffs and like just go for it. And I often think about this because like it's very easy to get caught and let your ego, that ego part of your personality take over and say like, this is mine. I don't want to tell anybody about this. Like, and I struggle with the Lippmann plate because like, it's a really neat thing. There's only a few people that do it actively right now. And it's just like, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. But then I'm like, everybody wants to understand it. Everybody wants to try to do it. So I have to say like, okay, I need to give that information and I need to tell people, because again, I just learned the recipe by somebody else publishing it. And I took it, I broke it down, I figured it out. I think I tweaked parts of it and made it a little bit better. And like, now I'm ready to tell other people how to do that. But sometimes I'm like, I don't want to tell anybody, like Smeagol, like it's mine, my practice. But, then I have to say, I would say like I always say the mark of a true master is somebody that can give away all of the secrets, but people still say, damn, I want to make work like that. And I think about it, I was thinking about it the other night. Like if you, me, and my neighbor, and then, Martin Scorsese all had a video camera and said, you have to make a movie right now. Who do you think's going to make the better movie? Even if it's just a video camera and a couple of like turds, hanging out with each other, Martin Scorsese will probably still make the better film, and that's the thing is like, I made a movie. Actually, me and my buddy Dan have a movie coming out. We're going to release it on the internet this weekend, and I think it's very good. I'm very proud of it. Is it going to win an Oscar? Probably not. But we went for it and we made it. And like, that's the best part about photography is like, everybody has the same basic tool set. Anybody can go out right now and buy a 5D Mark II. Anybody can go out and buy wet plate collodion chemistry and learn how to make wet plates and make beautiful wet plate pictures. And so it's like, but it's what you bring to the table, and that's what I always struggle with too, is like, it's like, how am I bringing my voice and like what I want to say to this? Because anybody can go out and do this stuff, but it's like, how do you make it yours? And that's the cool part, is you can, no matter what. And even if it's crummy and you're making something that's not crummy, that's the wrong thing to say, because I'm trying to get people excited. Like, even if it is just, snapshots and having fun, and it doesn't have to be serious fine artwork. I carry around a point and shoot camera just for, dinking around and taking pictures of my wife and our dogs and stuff like that. But then I also have the 4x5 when I'm very, I want to be focused and in that different mind state. And it's just, being able to pull different tools off the shelf when you need them.
There's no right way to do photography. There really is no right or wrong way to do it. I wanted to move on to home processing for beginners. Like,
absolutely. I mean, if you want to jump into doing color, obviously, like that's a whole different beast, you know. And but color home processing is getting easier. There's people, especially, you know, back to the kind of maker movement thing. You know, people are making kits that you can do this stuff at home. So it's easier to do that. But just developing a roll of black and white film, if you can cook dinner, you can make yourself a roll of black and white film. And like, not even cooking dinner, if you can make macaroni and cheese, Kraft Easy Mac, if you can do that, you can develop film. If you can't do Easy Mac, well, just shoot digital.
People eat McDonald's.
Yeah, that's sorry, but you know what I mean? It's like, but that's all it is. It's like one liquid for a certain period of time at a certain temperature. Dip, 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 then dip, 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 then dip, dip, wash it, and you're done. If you go all in and you buy, you know, you need a tank, you know, you need a developer, you'll probably spend $100. You know what I mean? When you get all the stuff that you need, processing chemistry, a tank of reel, you know, a jug to hold all your stuff in and things like that. But you can get, I put my stuff in brown glass jugs. You can get a 1 gallon amber glass thing with a rubber cork for $4 on the internet. You know, so like having this stuff, it's not that expensive. But you have to, it's just committing to it. It's like getting into anything else new. It's like if you want to try cross-country skiing for the first time, hell yeah, it's going to be intimidating. Where do the bindings go? How do I do this? Is this the right size? You know, am I doing the whole thing correctly? But it's about diving into it. And you just got to dive into it. So you have your, just buy the stuff. And, you know, you can go on YouTube and learn how to do anything now. I have a great video on how to develop your own 35 millimeter film, but there's other fantastic videos out there on how to process film. So it's just one of many. So pick one, watch it, follow the steps like you would do anything else. And then, like you said, at the other end of the tunnel, when you turn that light back on and you go like this and you stretch out that roll of film and you go, holy crap, I did it. And you really see how easy it is, then it just becomes a matter of like making it a habit and a routine. And like, I'm kind of bad at it right now. Like, you know, for a while I was in the rhythm of shooting a roll of 35 millimeter film and developing it as soon as it was done. Now I have like 6 rolls of Tri-X sitting upstairs and I'm like, I guess I'll develop it at some point. You know, but it turns into one of those things where sometimes it's like, yeah, it's just like I know it'll only take me 9 minutes to do this whole thing and, you know, be done and have these 6 rolls of film, you know, in a big friggin' tube, you know. But yeah, the best advice is just go for it. Just buy the stuff and go for it. But, you know, you got to want to try to do it. If you're not excited about trying something different and like if you're not a curious experimental person, probably not. And again, it kind of comes back to cooking. If you're the type of person who's like, I don't really want to cook, I'm just going to go to McDonald's, you know, developing your own film might not be for you. And that's why you can shoot a roll of film, take it, have it processed, scan, and post them on Instagram. But I feel like the real thrill is to complete the whole process. I like to shoot something, scan it, post it on Instagram, but then I also like to come down here, toss it in the enlarger, make a print, and then just have that final little thing. And that's a habit I've been in since college, where even in college, it was just like bang, bang, hammering out silver prints or hammering out inkjet prints. You know, now I have piles of boxes of stuff. So when I die someday, you know, somebody's going to come in here and just be like, look at all of this stuff. And it's going to be so many different processes and there's so many random things, you know.
That's a donate to the museum.
Maybe, sure, whoever wants it.
I want to move us forward here. I want to talk a little bit about advanced chemistry, specifically how to make your own home D76. We had talked a little bit about that before, but I'm curious to actually like interface about that.
Again, making your own developer is like the universe. D76 was developed and like that's the developer that most developers were compared to over time. So I started using D76 in college. I liked it. It never steered me wrong, so I just kind of stuck with it. It's like, why ruin a good thing? You know what I mean? There's other developers that work fantastic. I know people who really like HC110, but to me, that debate, you know, what developer do you use? It's like, it's the Canon and Nikon thing. It's like, I started with Canon. I shoot Canon. You know, it's like somebody else starts with Nikon. They usually end up, you know, staying and shooting Nikon. So it's like I started with D76 and I just stick with it. But, as we spoke about earlier, and you mentioned that you were having trouble with some of the prepackaged stuff, because I like the prepackaged chemistry, because it's just like, I just know it's ready to go. And like when you're really working and you're in the rhythm of doing something, you know from yourself, if you're doing volume, you don't want to have to think about like, okay, a little of this, a little of that, make sure it's all measured and balanced right. You just want to pour it in, freaking mix it up until it's ready to go, cool it off to the temperature you need, and, let it rip. I prefer that, but again, in the pinch, if I need something, like I need Dectol right now. So I need Dectol because I have to make a print for someone who commissioned a print for me. So I have all the parts and pieces to do that, and you can make your own developer. And again, making your own developers, it might sound intimidating. You hop in here and hydroquinone, metol, potassium bromide, sodium sulfite. It's like, well, what are these things? Am I going to burn my hand? Is this going to hurt me? It's for the most part, when you're doing just traditional black and white stuff, they're not that bad. If you get dusted in the face with some hydroquinone, it's not going to be the most fun experience. But as long as you're careful and you treat everything with respect, and just, again, it's the same thing. When you pour your bag of D76 into that big bucket to mix it up, there's hydroquinone in there. So all you're doing is buying the separate ingredients apart. Now, Kodak will do some other things. They might pop in a proprietary ingredient to keep stuff from, mixing or riding a different way or something like that. But when you're buying, you're just breaking it apart, and you could say, okay, well, you got this, 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 and this. And then it's really like making instant iced tea. You get a hot plate. You need a good, consistent heat source. If you don't have a fancy hot plate stirrer, like I have two really nice hot plate stirrers, which make your life really easy. If you don't know what a hot plate stirrer is, it's a hot plate, so it's a heat source, and then it has a magnetic stirring mechanism underneath. And inside of your beaker, you put a little stirring bar, which is essentially a magnet coated in plastic, and it'll rip around in there and it stirs for you. So you don't have to sit there, with your hand in it and mix it up. And then all you do is just buy each individual chemistry, and you can buy all of these things. They're out there readily available. Hydroquinone has other uses. You're using it for photo developer, but it's also what people use for skin bleaching and things like that. So people bleach their booty holes with hydroquinone, and it also develops silver halide. So all this stuff is available. It's out there. Some things are harder to get than others. Like if you're doing wet plate collodion, ether is going to be harder to get than metol or hydroquinone. You can call Mike at Artcraft Chemicals in here in New York, Bostic and Sullivan down in New Mexico, Photographer's Formulary out in Montana, Freestyle out in California. All these places will have access to some of this stuff. Some things are going to be easier than others. Like getting, something very specific from Freestyle is going to be harder than getting it from Mike at Artcraft in New York, because Mike is a chemical distributor. Like that's what he does. He sells chemistry for people for other things, but it just so happens that you can use chemistry for photography. So I buy that stuff, and then it's just, you get your heat on your hot plate, you get the water up to a specific temperature. It's like you add 750 mils of water. If you're going to make like a liter of this stuff, you add 750 mils of water, you pour in each individual part and piece. So you'll have like your metol and hydroquinone, and I'm not sure if it's I'm saying they're the right parts and pieces. But you have one of those as your reducing agent, so that's what's going to help convert that silver halide back into a silver grain that you see on your film. You're going to have something like potassium bromide in there, which is going to be a restrainer, so that's going to help slow down the chemical action, because if it's too active, it'll just go in there and go kapow! And then all of a sudden you just get tons of density and it doesn't work great. So the restrainer, just like, that's kind of like, yeah, he just pulls you back. He's the guy in the fight that's like, chill, bro, chill, And then D76 is the sodium sulfite is a solvent-based developer, so it gets in there and it, like the sodium sulfite, there's a lot of it in there, so it chews up the grain first. So it actually like etches the grain before it converts it back into silver. You have a more fine grain look. That's what the D76 does. That's the advantage over some other things. But again, once you have the water that's warm, just take away all the silly names, and it's just like add part 1, boom, it's dissolved. Add part 2, boom, it's dissolved. Add part 3,
and so
4, 5. Once they're all dissolved,
you don't stir once.
What's that?
hot plate. You don't stir, huh? You just have that stir thing for you, huh?
That's why you use it. So it's just sitting there, and all I do is sit there as I pour, and once it's dissolved, I pour the next one in. And then eventually it's all dissolved. You pour it into, a jug like that you need, like a container, and then you let it cool off. If you need to use it immediately, what you do is just like you could put it into a little beaker if you only need a little bit. So say you're developing one roll of 35 millimeter. You just got the craziest picture in the world. You got to get it developed, but your developer was dead and you need to make a new batch. Just pour a little bit into a beaker, put it into an ice bath. You drop it to the temperature that you need, and then whoop, you're ready to go. And the whole other, gallon can still be warm. So, you can just take off what you need and cool it off, and you're ready to go. And it's just like, it's little things like that. Not everybody has access to those little kinds of tips necessarily.
I'm sure there's got to be a chemical supply out here, but one thing I was curious about is, would that then allow me to mix D76 in smaller quantities and keep the concentrated chemicals longer? Because my issue with it is that it doesn't have the shelf life for the amount of black and white rolls that I get, because I don't, like 99% of what people send out is color negative or color slide.
Yeah.
To Dave's film lab.
Yeah, for sure. And then you can keep, the chemicals, all the chemicals stored separately will have a longer shelf life than if they're all mixed together. But like I pulled bags of D76 from like the 80s that still worked okay. And then but the next bag didn't work good for some reason. But yeah, that's the whole kind of advantage there, is that like if you read the recipe and it says this makes 1 liter, right? So to make a gallon, you'd make 3 of those. So you'd triple everything. But if you want to make half that amount, you only want to make like 500 milliliters, just cut the recipe in half. And then again, if you wanted to make double the amount, you just said if it's 5 grams of bromide, you're adding 10 grams of bromide versus 20 grams of bromide, depending on how you're stacking it up. So say you need a whole crap load of it, you can just double everything. But say you want to make just a little bit, you're like, I'm not going to use this much D76. So cut it in half, make 500 mils, and use it as you need it. And that's what I do with some stuff, like with the Lippmann plates. You make a stock concentrated developer. I pull off a little bit of that, and I actually dilute that with water, and then I add another chemical to it. So it's kind of like I have a stock, a dilution, and then a final part to like make the developer, like the go juice, really. But that stock, if I make a liter of it,
is it not?
It doesn't last as long. Excuse me?
You put NOS energy drink? Is that the last thing?
No, it's Red Bull, actually.
Red Bull.
If I'm feeling really spunky and I want to punch a hole in the drywall, it's Monster.
Well, this is awesome. Like I'm really enjoying talking about all these different things. I don't get to interface that often with anybody who even knows what D76 is or any of that. And if I could be honest,
D76 for life, bro.
I didn't like D76 for so many years. It's what I learned with in high school. And then I got really into Rodinol, and then I got really into Xtol. And Xtol is amazing. I still prefer Xtol and think it looks better than D76, especially for high-speed stuff, for pushing. I got so many packets from Kodak that were bad.
And that's, again,
it was dated 2021, all the packets.
That sucks. But that's the cool thing is that you can make your own developer, so you don't have to buy it from them. Again, back to what I originally said, where we're coming back around to it being open source. Where like, 10 years ago, not everybody would say like, oh, maybe I can make it myself. I don't know. Maybe people did say that, because there's definitely people out there who've been mixing their own chemistry for decades. But like now it's way easier to get online and be like, how do I make D76? You Google it, and then all of a sudden there it is, somebody making a YouTube video on how to mix everything up. And there are common recipes that are out there. You can find the stuff. You can buy amidol and make your own amidol developer. You can buy the stuff that goes into Rodinol and mix your own Rodinol developer. So, again, it's easier to buy something that's already pre-made, but then photography is a business of trust since the beginning. If we want to jump into like photo history stuff, you have to you have to trust that your material is going to work. You know, if you're a photographer and you're out there and you're used to shooting portrait and you know that it always does a certain thing at the certain time of day, if you push it by a half a stop, you know, you get that perfect color that you like. But then all of a sudden you're pushing everything by a half a stop and you get all your stuff back and you're like, what the shit? It's not doing the thing that I like to do. You've lost that trust, you know? And the thing is, and I think I talked about it on the Kodak podcast, was like the whole pray for your emulsion story, where the cows were eating mustard seeds in a particular region of France. That's where they were getting the gelatin from for the cows. Because of the mustard seeds being consumed by the cows, there's higher levels of thiourea in the gelatin. Thiourea is a sulfur compound which contributes to more speed in a photographic material, right? So they change the gelatin source, they lose all the speed and thing. People are like, what the shit, man? The dry plates aren't working the way that they used to work. And now they got to figure out what's going on. And they figure out, oh shit, we just got to purify the gelatin, add the sulfur in, and then boom, we got it back to where we need it to be. You know, so like that's the whole thing. If you can come over here and you're like, well, shit, man, you know, D76, every packet that I'm getting is not working, that blows, you know, and you start to lose that trust. But then you realize that some things you're never going to get back, like dye transfer, it's gone. Sorry, you know. And you might have some weirdo who's like, I make my matrix film and I'm doing it all myself, and that's awesome. But that becomes a lifestyle, and you're like the only person that does that. And if it's important to you to be the only person that does that obscure thing, fucking rock on. But you know, it becomes really hard for people to do that. But like everybody, at least for now, is going to be able to pop a roll 35 millimeter or color film into their point and shoot camera and like, you know, go out and jam with their friends and snap some pics, have them scanned by Dave's Film Services, and you know what I mean? And then popped into, you can, you know, post them on Instagram, and they just look cooler because, you know, I don't mind the digital camera. I like having it with me. It's easier to carry my iPhone when I'm on a mountain bike ride than it is to carry the panoramic camera. But all the panoramic cameras are, you know, shots are way cooler, you know, in black and white than my iPhone shots. But it's about picking what tool makes sense. And it's about like same thing with developers. Like, you know, you said you didn't like D76 for a while. You know, we both learned with D76 and I, you know, teched all for paper, but it's about picking the tool that makes the most sense. If I'm going to shoot a dry plate, and I know I'm going to make a silver gelatin print with it, you know, with graded paper or say maybe collodion chloride paper, which is a more forgiving POP process, I will use D76. But if if I know I want to use these dry plates to make salted paper prints or albumin prints that require a lot of density in my negative, I'll develop it with a diluted Dectol because I know it's going to be a more aggressive developer and give me more density. So the same way that you pick a film stock to make a cool image for a fashion shoot is the same way that you can pick and choose, you know, your developers for your fine art prints. Again, it's all tool sets and like what you choose and then, you know, how to use them, you know, and then that's the cool thing about photography is everybody has access to it.
And it's trial and error too, because like, let's say when I was starting out doing contact prints, when I made my new darkroom here, I love contact prints, by the way. I love anything that's small and intimate. Tin types are amazing for that reason. Some people do bigger tin types, but for the most part, you're not going to have a 4 foot by 5 foot tin type. It's probably not a big thing. I doubt that that's a common thing.
I have an opinion about that.
But
here's the thing: it's like you make that massive tin type. Who the fuck's gonna look at it?
Yeah.
You know?
Little prints. It's a tangible thing. You can hold it, and you can personally interface with it, like one-on-one. The way we're talking right now, as opposed to a big print in a gallery or something where you're with other people. I just like the intimacy of you holding the print, because you're not going to take your 20 by 24 off the wall very often and hold it and just appreciate it, you know? And my point with that at the end was that I had experimented with the different concentrations of using the Ilford multigrade developer. And it suggests like a 1:9 dilution, and I had to use a 1:2 dilution to get the contrast that I wanted. Nothing online said to use a 1:2, and in fact, Google told me not to use 1:2. And it didn't make a difference. My prints turned out bad. The contrast was punchy. I could get it developed in a reasonable amount of time. You know, so a lot of it comes down to like, well, did you try it? Like, try it. Go and try what this dilution does. Try doing a heavier dilution. Try doing less and see what it does.
Yeah, I like that too, and I think that's a good way. Like, some people learn by trying and having a failure, and again, it's not a failure if you're learning something from it. But I'll do a lot of stuff. It's like with the holograms. I wasted. I didn't waste plates, but I didn't get good results from several plates. Trying different positions and different setups and things like that. But then other positions and other setups, I had great results. And it's about you got to keep notes, and you have to be scientific. But and there's aspects of it where you can be punk rock, but then there's aspects of it where you have to be a technician. Otherwise, you'll get lost in the sauce. You got to find that medium. That's the best thing, where it's like you're being precise and you're being, only change one variable at a time. If you're changing 3 or 4 variables, you're never going to know what's causing the problem. But you have to experiment, because, it's about what you want. And like, you might need to use a 1 to 2 developer versus a 1 to 9 developer, because again, like you said, that's the contrast you want for your print. And that's the fun part about photography. And to kind of backpedal for a moment, like what you were saying about, the mammoth plates and people shooting big stuff, that's all well and good. And I think it has its place, but, unless you're in the gallery setting, and like, even like when you go to the gallery and there's just like these gigantic sea prints and you're like, okay. My favorite era of photography is that what you described, that intimate era, right? You didn't put tintypes on the wall, and like people are presenting tintypes, in galleries on the wall and stuff like that. A tintype was never intended to be looked at on the wall. Yeah, but that's to say, like, what do you know, Nick? It can be anything it wants to be. That's totally true. But the best way, in my experience, to experience it is to hold it in your hand and get it close to a nice, strong light source, and let that light reflect off of it, and you hold it in your hand. And daguerreotype, it was about that. And like, there was an era of photography before we had, it's not even about social media. We didn't have freaking television or anything like that. You didn't have movie theaters. You didn't have any of that stuff. And photography was a form of entertainment. And like, you would like collect these things. It's like, look at my daguerreotype. Hold this shit and like check it out. You know what I mean? Like, these things are rad. And it's like, you would have stereo views, and like there was apparatus and things that you could use that were like parlor treats, to like entertain your friends. And like that's my favorite time period of photography, when it's about that experience. And I try to bring that for like my fine artwork. I like to make interactive stuff that you have to look in or get close to, or it's kind of hard now with COVID to touch things, but now I'm getting into, again, back to the maker stuff. Like, you can get into motion sensors so you can have things activate on their own, because I like stuff that lights up. It's just, making prints is rad. But again, I've been doing photography since I was 15. I made more prints than I need to ever make in my life, but I'm still going to I have lots more prints to make. So it's fun for me now to kind of break it up and, do other things. But yeah, I do really enjoy small, intimate stuff.
You ever struggle throwing them away?
Some things, yes. Some things, no. I don't know. I guess I got really, after a certain point in time, I got to the point where it's just like stuff that I'm like, it just got to go. Gone, out.
I just threw away like well over 1,000 negatives and a ton of prints and different stuff, because my girlfriend and her daughter moved in and just needed to make space. And it was also with the fires here, I was looking at, like, I have way too much stuff. My trunk wasn't
some things
prints I had. My trunk would be full with only prints, and I was like, that's a problem, because I know I don't want all of these. There was like only maybe 50 that I actually wanted out of thousands.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's just like, you make sure you call that stuff. And that's the thing, like, even with your family albums too, it's just like, you have boxes and boxes and boxes of 4x6 moto photo prints. Like, go through and pick out the best ones, because like, if you need to save that stuff, and this doesn't go to just us, this goes to anybody who listens, like, tell your parents, tell your aunts, tell your uncles, tell your cousins, like any of those things, just like make sure you have the best stuff selected out, and like make prints of all the crap on your iPhone, because you drop your phone in the pool and then bloop, there goes your baby pictures, there goes the last photos of your dog there, and you didn't make prints because we're not a culture that makes photographic prints anymore.
Well, and that actually brought us right to the last topic here, which is printing. And I think printing is so important. You hit the nail on the head. This thing is going to end up in the toilet
That's always definitely a fear. I'm like, if you're going, you make sure don't fall on the toilet.
Yeah, like people don't have albums anymore. Like, if you go to somebody's house, their coffee table maybe has an iPad on it, and I don't want to thumb through your iPad.
Actually, I heard vinyl albums outsold CDs recently. For the first time since like forever.
I hope that I'm at least helping in a small amount to that, because I tell everybody that I meet, print your damn photos. Print them. Please print your photos. It's so important. The way that you value those prints will never be the same as your phone. And here's the other thing I want to say. I carry a printed portfolio, a 5x7 portfolio with me. And I don't ever want to get out my phone and be like, hey, check out my photography. I don't want to do that. My printed portfolio, though, I could hand that to you and you can intimately view it yourself. You can go through it.
Absolutely.
You would like.
Well, I'll give you the perfect example then. So I have several iPhones, 2 of them, in fact, that, they're dead. You can't turn them on, can't get anything off of them. And I have guaranteed 1,000 photos on each phone. I can't get those photos on there. They're gone forever. So pictures of my dogs, pictures of my wife and I, whatever was going on in my life at that point in time, whatever, because I use my phone when I'm doing research to document things and stuff like that, so I can go back later and I have references. All that stuff's gone. But I can go over there, and I'm looking at the box right now, and I can open it up, and I can pull out another smaller box, and I can open that up, and I can pull out a 8x10 black and white photograph of my great-grandparents from New York City at the turn of the century, almost 100 years ago, and it looks like they were standing there today, And I can see pictures of my grandma when she was a little girl, and I can just pop them out of a box, like you said, and I can hand them to you. I can go and find those things, and they're there, And then whatever happens to me and whatever happens to that photo will still exist, and that will keep on keeping on. I can't tell you what's going to happen to the cloud, all of our digital information. I assume that it's going to be there because the internet's its own bizarre, amazing, incredible sort of thing that I don't think it'll ever go away. But I know that will always be there, and you can't erase a picture. If that transformer explodes outside in the back of my house and it fries all of my hard drives, right, then I still have that picture. I still have all of my printed portfolios. And here's the other thing, and part of my prophecy has already come true. So if you don't believe me, you're stupid, because it's already happening. I'm on a laptop right now. There are 3 USB-C ports, right? The little Thunderbolt. There is no USB port. I need a mouse, right? So I need a mouse to connect to this dongle USB. So I can only access one USB over here. So all of my fancy hard drives that I bought and spent all that money that connect with USB, regular USB 2 and 3 and stuff like that, I can't connect them to this computer. If my dongle breaks, I can't get any of that information. So your hard drives are as useful as a floppy disk. If I hand you a floppy disk right now and said, here, go get this information off of it, you would need a dongle for your dongle, and you'd need an old operating system to open that. So eventually when Photoshop comes out with the cloud version 9 that you have to pay for every other day or something like that, and it port CR2 files from 5D Mark II from 20 years ago, how are you going to get those things open? But your goddamn negatives and your freaking prints are always going to be there. So print all of your raw files now. Print anything that's on your hard drive, all the stuff that you loved or cared about. Just make a quick print and go through. Don't print them all, because again, I have photos, photos from bike events or hanging out with my friends and stuff like that, where there's 200 images in there, but only one of them or 2 of them is a really good grab. So make that print. And again, I'm fortunate that I've always had that. I guess I wouldn't say fortunate, I'm smart and I've always been in the habit of making prints of all the things, throughout my life, and again, I'm going to use it for the winter time. I'm going to hop in here and I'm going to do some more enlarging, because I got 2 of those Russian panoramic swing lens cameras, and I finally got my hands on a little Rolly 35 that I've always wanted. So I've been shooting more snapshot stuff. Hello, whoever that is. I've been shooting more snapshot stuff, so I have a cache of negatives that I really want to make some prints from. But, you know, darkroom time, for me at least, you know, when it's really sunny and nice out, I want to be outside doing stuff and taking pictures. And, you know, I'll try to save more of the darkroom time for the cold winter months. Like, I have a lot of holograms to make and a lot of prints to make, you know, over the next couple months as it gets colder here.
All right. Well, Nick, it's been such a pleasure, and thank you for doing this.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely, man. No problem. Like, I can talk all night. I'm not short on words, as you can tell.
Well, I really appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll leave it on that. Any last words or anything that you'd like people to check out? Any current work or anything like that?
I'm going to be trying to update my website over the winter time, you know, because I have this whole body of Lippmann plates and stuff like that. I have a whole bunch of pictures that I need to document, because I actually have to photograph them with my DSLR and a macro lens to get the best results for them. So I'm going to be trying to put some of those up on my website over the winter time. My last body of work, the Phantasmagoria stuff with the Seeing Shadows, I just need to update my website because it's a cooler experience and the way that I want it to kind of look. But you could check that out to see some older work. And I'm really active on Instagram. So if anybody wants to follow me on there, it's just at Nick Brandreth, NickBrandreth. And yeah, hit me up. And like the other thing is, like, don't be afraid, you know, just like trying to develop your film for the first time, don't be afraid to shoot me a message and say what's up, because I will make you not want to talk to me anymore, because I'll talk to you too much about photography.
Beautiful. All right, Nick, you have yourself a good night.
Thanks, bro. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Check me out on Instagram at Dave's Film Lab or www.davesfilmlab.com. And yeah, feel free to shoot me any questions that you've got. I'm processing C41, black and white, and E6 film, and been experimenting with a lot of different things and doing a lot of tests. So I'm hoping to have more videos coming soon to share what I'm up to. Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.